So a while ago, I made a video called Horror Games Before the PS1. The premise of that video was that I think Silent Hill and Resident Evil basically invented the horror genre that we know today. Like if you play any horror game today, you can trace some kind of inspiration back to one of those two games. So in that video, I looked at horror games that released before 1994, which was when the PS1 released. Anyway, this video is kind of a sequel to that, although you definitely don't have to watch that one to understand this one. I want to look at what PC horror games were like during the PS1's lifespan, so from the years 1994 to 2000. Were they good? Were they scary? And how do they run on modern hardware? Phantasmagoria released in 1995. It was made by Sierra Entertainment, the company that made a lot of games, but the funniest is definitely Leisure Suit Larry. Anyway, when I was doing research for this video, I saw a Reddit post that described Phantasmagoria as a playable B-movie, and that is a very accurate thing to say. It's a point-and-click adventure game that has you exploring the massive Carnavash estate and the town nearby, finding items and unraveling the story as you go, a story that plays out in either partially or fully live-action cutscenes. It's actually kinda impressive how well the live-action actors fit into the clearly computer-generated setting. When Sierra approved this game, it was budgeted for $800,000, but by the end it costed over $4 million, which is like the bare minimum to make a game these days, but that was not the case in 1995. A lot of that cost comes down to the fact that the production of this video game was much more like the production of a movie. You even had a Hollywood VFX studio working on it, the Character Shop. But the question is, was it worth it? Maybe. I'm not sure. Objectively, Phantasmagoria was a success. It sold over 300,000 copies in its first week, earning Sierra $12 million in sales. It went on to then become the best-selling computer game in the world for a little while, and the third best-selling piece of software in the world, only behind Windows 95 and Microsoft Plus. That is an absolutely crazy metric, even if it didn't hold the title for long, and to be fair, Phantasmagoria is pretty impressive. I think this game is kind of like a super early version of games like The Last of Us or the new God of War games, which immediately sounds like a crazy thing to say, but hear me out here. Those games use motion capture to make animations of real actors doing real things, which are then later ported into the game as animations. The best use of this is always in cutscenes, where you get to see real emotion on the faces of the characters, rather than modelers and animators just doing their best at replicating it. This game is literally just that, but rather than motion capture, it's actual live-action actors in a digital space doing things. Sometimes not even in a digital space, some cutscenes are fully live action. Like I said earlier, the actors interacting with the digital space look surprisingly good, and some of the live action cutscenes are great as well. One stands out to me as being genuinely pretty great gore, but I probably can't show it on YouTube. The only real problem is that Phantasmagoria is barely even a video game. You move from place to place clicking on items and getting a little scene of Adrian, the main character, checking it out and then moving on to the next scene. If you're lucky, you'll get a little cutscene between a couple characters to watch, but like, that's it. You're just watching cutscenes the entire time. The only actual interactive part of this game is the very end, where you either click on the right things at the right time or die. It's the same with any kind of choice or consequence in this game. There is none until you reach the very end, where your choice is pick the right item, and your consequence is to die if you get it wrong. Phantasmagoria is literally a playable B-movie, which of course begs the question, is it a good movie? If I had to sum up the story of Phantasmagoria, it's like a domestic violence simulator. Like genuinely this game goes to some uncomfortable places. Like the horror of this game never comes from the spooky sounds or haunted paintings, it came from the fear of the next time there would be a cutscene between Adrian and her husband.
Well, I've got work to do, Adrian. We're not finished yet.
Don, it can wait. You need to take some time out to relax. You're so stressed out.
I've got publishing deadlines. Can you understand that? You see, I don't get the same ass-kissing royal treatment your publisher gives you.
Now, in all fairness to him, he is possessed by a demon that Adrian kinda released, so it's not entirely his fault, but if you're uncomfortable with those kind of topics, definitely don't play this game. Anyway, let me give you a rundown of the major characters in this story. You play as Adrian, a successful drama writer. Adrian is an absolute doormat. She allows basically everyone in the story to walk all over her, which is partially why this game has so little choice in it. Throughout the game, her husband starts treating her worse and worse, and yet never does she connect that it might have something to do with the grisly murder memories she witnesses across the house. She doesn't even really confront him about his behavior, rather just begging him to leave the house because it's stressing him out. Her husband is named Dan, and he's honestly kind of an asshole even before he gets possessed by demons.
Adrian, I can do this better myself, please.
Okay, jeez.
I'm sorry, hon. I'm just trying to get this done.
He's a photographer, which kind of explains the asshole part. But he ends up getting possessed by a demon summoned by a magician from the 1800s named Carno. Adrian unwittingly releases the demon in her exploration of the house, but you can hardly blame her because it's her property, and if I found a strange hidden chapel in my house, I'd explore it too. Anyway, Dan becomes kind of a hermit, spending his days holed up in a bathroom he was supposed to be converting into a darkroom for his photo development. The first time he really snaps at Adrian is when he gets pissed that she didn't buy him any drain cleaner, which he never asked her to do and could easily go do himself in town. That is, if he wasn't possessed by a demon that refuses to leave the house.
Don't be coy with me. I asked you several times to go buy me drain cleaner. Now, did you do it?
I know you said the sink was clogged in your darkroom, but you never asked me to go get you any drain cleaner. I would have remembered something like that.
You know, this is just like you. I bust my ass for you all the time. And you don't do anything but sit on your butt like you're doing right now.
It only gets worse from there, with him constantly snapping at Adrian for nothing and verbally abusing her, until eventually he ends up sexually assaulting her. Like I said, it gets very dark. In town, you have three major characters. The real estate agent, Bob, is like the worst person ever. Just watch this scene.
Pretty girl, a little, give me the nose. The bubble, I love the bubble. Come on.
He doesn't have a major role in the story, but honestly the actor did a great job at portraying a stereotypically horrible person, so he's memorable at least. Harv is the old guy who runs the general store in town. He's a decent enough guy, but he doesn't really have any role in the story, other than selling you that goddamn drain cleaner. Finally in town is Luann, who runs an antique shop. She's one of very few characters who's actually nice to Adrian in this game, partially because she's a fan of your books. She'll tell you a lot of backstory on Carno, the magician who used to own your house, as well as sell you a crucial item later on in the story. Just outside town is this ancient guy named Malcolm. He lived with Carno when he was young, which puts him at over 100 years old. You only meet him twice, but he ends up telling you what you need to defeat the demon. His nurse is named Ethel, and her purpose is to refuse you entry until you produce some kind of artifact that Malcolm will want to see. It'll usually either be a notebook or a picture. A couple days in, Adrian finds a homeless woman named Harriet and her big-ass son Cyrus. They've been living in the barn on the estate for longer than Adrian and Dawn have owned the place. When Adrian tries to evict them, Harriet convinces her to let them stay in exchange for her doing housework and Cyrus doing yard work.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, what do you say, huh? We'll work for nothing, just room and board. Come on, don't pitch us out in the cold. We got no place else to go.
Oh, okay.
You're kind of meant to distrust them at first, or at least I did, but they turn out to be basically the only friends Adrian has in this place. I mean, they're not like eternally in her debt for the privilege of getting to work on her estate without pay, but they're nice enough. Harriet is a psychic medium or whatever, so she does a palm reading and tarot reading for Adrian, both of which bode ill. Later on they do a seance which has Harriet vomiting up some goo that turns into the face of Carno, who then informs Adrian about the whole demon situation. What's kind of weird is that Harriet says that she's never actually done a successful seance before, yet she just randomly decided to do one with Adrian. I guess the reason would be that Adrian had asked her for a tarot reading the day before, so maybe Harriet thought she finally had a friend to share her weird interest with, I don't know. Anyway, one of the first things you see Cyrus trying to do is beat your cat with a stick, which is obviously not great, but later on he helps you cross a gap by pushing down a tree. Now keep in mind, the two only work on the estate for like one day, but on that day they actually do work. Like Harriet basically cleans the entire house and Cyrus chops wood for the like 10 fires going on in the house at once.
Just hear those sleigh bells jingling, ring ting tingling.
Once Dawn finds out about them, he threatens to kill them behind Adrian's back, prompting the two to try to leave only to be killed by Dawn, along with a phone repairman sent by the real estate agent. Finally, the last major character is Carno, the magician from the 1800s who used to own this estate. Carno dabbled in the black arts, which resulted in him summoning the demon and it possessing him. It's actually kind of unclear, at least to me, how long he was possessed by the demon, because he ends up killing 5 separate wives throughout his life, although somehow he managed to explain them all away via natural causes. I mean, it was the 1800s, but like, I don't really see how you explain any of these. One he kills with a shovel, then fills her mouth with dirt. One he shoves a wine bottle through her eye, and another he straps into a medieval torture device. The only one I could see being easily covered up was the 4th wife. who he force-fed animal guts until she choked to death, but then again, why would the police think she was eating animal guts in the first place? Anyway, the fifth and final wife, Marie, was having an affair with Carnot's prop master, Gaston. Carnot knew about this and confronted her right before a big show, where he does a trick that has him escaping from a burning chair with a guillotine swinging overhead. Marie tells Gaston that Carnot knows and he's going to kill them both, so Gaston sabotages the trick in an attempt to kill Carnot. Carnot ends up escaping before the blade got him, but he went to the hospital covered in third-degree burns, only to then escape the hospital, return to his house, and kill both Marie and Gaston, then later dying himself of his injuries. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let me give you a brief overview of each day and the events that take place on them. Day 1 is mainly about getting a sense for your surroundings. Almost nothing important happens unless you decide to randomly lay around on beds throughout the house, which will give you this dream sequence of hands coming out of the bed. You can also bother Don a couple times throughout the day, although keep in mind he's not possessed yet, so he's still nice to his beautiful and caring wife, which is me, of course.
Hi, honey.
Oh!
Adrian is pretty much unbothered by all the crazy shit she sees in this house, such as a trophy room with a torture device in it, a cellar with a literal prison cell in it, a weird ghost cloud hovering over a baby's crib, and of course a chapel hidden behind a bricked up fireplace. You have to head in town to talk with Bob, the real estate agent, which is always pleasant.
My husband bought a house from you.
Too bad you got a husband, honey.
And he gives you the key which unlocks the hidden library where you then find the chapel. The chapel is where the chapter ends, but before that you can visit old Malcolm's house only to be refused entry by his dog. Anyway, inside the chapel is a mysterious book and a box which opens itself and releases the demon into the house where it then possesses Don. Day 2 begins with Don scolding his wife about not getting him any drain cleaner. Instead of telling his bitch ass to get his own drain cleaner, Adrian agrees to get him some.
Goddamn drain cleaner!
Each day from now on you can grab a fortune from a robot fortune teller in the main hall, and they all pretty much tell Adrian exactly what's going on, but she still doesn't get it. So on this day you can head into town to buy some drain cleaner from Harv,
Goddamn drain cleaner!
picking up a free dog bone along the way, walk in on Bob and a client, pester Luann for information on Carnot.
I have a question. Excuse me, Lou?
Then give Malcolm's dog a bone, only to then be refused entry by his nurse instead. When you get home you find the barn door open and some pots and pans inside. We'll find out later that it's from Harriet and Cyrus, but for now Don just angrily takes his drain cleaner and kicks around the pots.
Goddamn drain cleaner!
The chapter ends when you try to visit him in the dark room, which he no longer lets you inside. Chapter 3 begins with a great romantic picnic with Don before Cyrus shows up out of nowhere and drags Adrian to the barn where his mom, Harriet, is stuck in the floor. So you free her, they guilt trip Adrian into letting them stay, you see a ghost in the nursery room, then find an old journal in the tower room, which is apparently where Malcolm stayed when he lived here. Showing this to Ethel makes her finally let Adrian inside to meet Malcolm, although she might as well not have.
Don't call me sir. I don't like it. It makes me feel old.
If you talk to Luann again, she shows you some newspaper articles that detail all of the mysterious natural causes that killed Carnot's various wives. Day 3 ends with Don yelling at his wife once again. Day 4 begins with the assault I mentioned earlier. After that, you can meet up with Harriet and give her a list of tasks to do, then later on watch her do each of these tasks if you want to be a menace. You can also give her a set of tarot cards and she'll perform a reading. It bodes pretty ill, but Adrian still doesn't care. The first time you check on Cyrus, he'll be trying to hit your cat with a stick, but after that you can ask him for help getting to a conservatory elsewhere on the estate. There you can use a telescope which reveals a hidden room in your house and watch the first of many murder scenes. The hidden room turns out to be a boarded up attic with a torture device inside. The most important thing here is a little pendant that you can trade with Luann later. I accidentally skipped the ending of this chapter, but apparently Don gets mad at the phone repairman that the real estate agent sent. Adrian wakes up late on night 5, which also happens to be Halloween night. This is when Harriet will do that seance where she pukes up the body of Carnot and he tells you to stop the demon. You can watch another murder, find your cat drowned in a pool, watch Marie and Gaston plot against Carnot, and enter a secret passage in the wall which allows you to enter Carnot's theater. You can also find a picture that you can show to Ethel to have another convo with Malcolm. But for now the day ends with Don passed out drunk in the main hall. The next morning starts off tender, but as soon as Adrian mentions leaving the house, Don goes back to his usual possessed self, revealing in the process that he's the one who killed your cat. If you go back to the chapel here, you can find an ancient spell book and a new secret entrance that leads down to the tombs where Carnot and his last wife Marie are buried. If you talk to Harriet or Cyrus today, you'll learn that they're leaving after Don threatened them. You can then head into town to talk with Malcolm again, where he tells you how to defeat the demon that Carnot summoned. At this point for me, my game bugged out and I couldn't continue, There was this thing that happened to me a couple times where I just couldn't move my mouse above a certain point on the screen, but it was always fixed by saving and quitting the game. So I tried that only to come back to my save to find that now I couldn't interact with anything, meaning I would be stuck in this barn forever. So I missed the ending cutscene to this chapter as well. Anyway, you can start from any chapter you want at any point from the main menu, which is really convenient, except when you do it you only start with the bare minimum items you would have needed to collect by now. So on day 6, one thing you can do is trade that pendant to Luann for a crucifix, which you can then use against the demon, except if you start from day 7 you don't have that and you can't leave the house, so like, you're cooked, right? No actually, because day 7 offers you a bunch of options on how you can finish it, specifically depending on what items you do and don't have. The main turning point for this chapter is entering the dark room, where a struggle happens between Dawn and Adrian which can either result in your death or the game progressing. There are 3 things that you need going in here: a small Christmas ornament which has sentimental value to Dawn, a holy object, and a sharp object. You have 2 options for both. The holy object can either be the crucifix from Luann, or if you don't have that going into day 7, you can take one from Marie's tomb. It's a little stupid because you can't take the one from the tomb unless you specifically don't have the other one on day 7, but whatever. The sharp object can either be a piece of glass found in the house, or you can use that little pendant which has a pin on the back. Anyway, when you enter the dark room, Dawn grabs Adrian and tries to kill her. You can stop him by sprinkling some drain cleaner in his face. And at this point you also have options. If you have the 3 necessary objects, you can just grab the ritual book in the dark room and continue. If you don't, a chase scene starts where you have to stab or otherwise stun Dawn in multiple rooms across the house while gathering the items that you need. It's pretty cool that you have that option and you're not just cooked if you didn't collect the right items going in. No matter what route you take, Dawn ends up capturing Adrian and strapping her into that device Kerner used in his botched trick, which has a guillotine that's about to come down on your head. What you need to do now is show him that ornament to distract him, then pull the lever, releasing the blade right onto Dawn's head. There's no way around it, you have to kill Dawn in order to beat the game. On one hand it's like, hell yeah, this guy literally raped Adrian, but on the other hand he was possessed by a demon which exits his body upon death, so it's kind of bittersweet in a way. Like, you just killed your husband and now you also have to kill the demon that was controlling him separately. Anyway, this is another sequence where your choice actually matters, although again the choice is just pick the right item / path, or have the demon rip Adrian's face apart in a kinda impressive gore sequence. The game ends when you complete the ritual Malcolm told you about, killing the demon and letting Adrian leave unharmed. Physically anyway. I don't know if someone could ever emotionally recover from that 7-day period. But that's basically Phantasmagoria. If you read reviews from the time, people were very impressed by the game, saying things like gaming is finally becoming as prestigious as film. That's not an exact quote, but I think that idea is kinda stupid because Phantasmagoria is basically a movie. You just get to see multiple endings towards the end of it. I would not at all say I disliked Phantasmagoria. I think the plotline and characters were goofy enough to make it fun to watch. Harriet was a standout for me, but will I ever play it again? Definitely not.
I live again.
Now let's go in the complete opposite direction of a point-and-click adventure game. Blood, released in 1997. It's a first-person shooter, what we would call today a boomer shooter. Blood isn't exactly a horror game. I mean, it's hard to really be scary when you can just kill everything coming your way, but I think it somewhat fits the bill. I chose Blood for this video because on Wikipedia, it says that it features occult themes. That mainly comes in the form of the enemies. Most of them are cultists and the demons that they've summoned. There are a couple moments that could be considered horror adjacent, like the occasional disembodied whisper or this entire level that takes place inside a plane covered entirely by gnashing teeth and eyes, but mostly it's a shooter game. Anyway, you can actually buy Blood on Steam, but I couldn't tell if the version on Steam included the original version of the game or just the improved version, so I decided not to risk it. I like to experience these old games in as pure a form as possible, so I went searching for a copy of the original online. That actually ended up landing me with a version of Blood that was labeled specifically not to be redistributed. So I loaded it up into RetroArch using DOSBox Pure and got this warning, which says the Blood requires at least 23 megabytes of memory to run, and I was only giving it 13. Of course I ignored that warning, which may be the reason why my copy of Blood had 0 cutscenes in it. I actually didn't think Blood even had a story until I looked at the wiki, which talked about an opening cutscene. I actually don't know if it was the memory that caused that, because I think it's equally as likely that it's because I was running the shareware version of the game. But yeah, I had no idea what the fuck was going on story-wise while playing this game. The only thing I can actually attribute to the low memory was that the game would crash if I played it for too long, so I just had to save often. So I can't really comment on the control scheme of Blood. It looks horrible based on the menu, but DOSBox Pure actually automatically mapped the controls to a controller which was insanely based of it. As far as I can tell, this version of Blood has no native mouse support. If you want to look side to side or up and down, you have to hold a key to do so, which would have sucked. There was some other weirdness that came from DOSBox, like how navigating the menus with a controller had me using the joystick to go up and down and the D-pad to choose something, or how the game's default resolution of 320 by 240 resulted in some of the textures weirdly overlapping your weapon sprite or even the options on the menu. Each time I loaded into the game, the resolution was set back to that default, so anytime it crashed or I just came back to continue, I had to change that or suffer the consequences. Anyway, in order to beat Blood, I had to play on the second to lowest difficulty because I'm a little bitch. But even then, this game wasn't really easy, so let's run through the enemies of Blood. The most basic enemy is the zombie. They only have one melee attack, but they actually take a decent amount of damage to go down. You know you've killed a zombie when their head flies off their body, otherwise they'll get right back up. The second most basic enemy is the yellow robe cultist who carry a shotgun, the first weapon you get as well. They're mostly fodder, but if one catches you lacking when entering a room or something, they can easily take half your health off in a couple of seconds. Black robe cultists have a little more health and have a Tommy gun, which gives them much more range and also way more damage. There's also dynamite cultists who often blow themselves up on accident, and if you play the Plasma DLC pack, there's cultists armed with other weapons that the player can get, like the Tesla gun. Fat zombies, or bloated butchers as the wiki calls them, are a much tougher version of the zombie. Of course they have good melee damage, but unlike the normal zombie, they have two ranged attacks. One where they puke on you and one where they throw a knife at you. They also take way more damage than most other normal enemies in the game. Rats and bats are mostly just annoying. They do low damage but are hard to hit with your gun. Spiders are similar, except when they hit you, you get nauseous or something, and the camera starts swaying around. There's also little fish in this game and they will attack you, although not very well. Hands, on the other hand, are absolute menaces. They're way easier to hit than the other small enemies, but bro, if they get their hand on you, they latch onto your neck and start choking you out. And by looking at the wiki, I've just learned that you can actually get them off by spamming the interact key, but I did not know that my entire playthrough, so anytime a hand got me, I was just cooked and had to reload a save. I tried shooting them off, meleeing them off, and even blowing myself up, before just concluding that they're unstoppable. Pretty stupid of me in retrospect, but it definitely did add to the horror of Blood. Phantasms are these Grim Reaper looking enemies that are invulnerable until they attack you, so you have to let them get close then shoot them right before they get an attack off on you. A very damaging attack, by the way. They also make a pretty cool sound when attacking. Fishmen are much more of a threat than normal fish, sometimes even chasing you onto the land. I think they look really cool, probably my favorite design in this game. Water isn't a huge part of this game, but you do have to navigate through tight underwater corridors sometimes, and when you do, there's almost always a fishman blocking your way. Hellhounds are one of the tougher enemies in this game. They have a lot of health and move super fast, but the main way they get you is by breathing fire. There's probably a way to put yourself out, but once you're on fire, I never found that way. So if the hound just breathed on me for too long, I would burn to death, all while listening to Caleb, the main character, scream in pain. Gargoyles come in two varieties, flesh and stone. Flesh are smaller and have less health, but it feels like they're also more mobile. While you can look upwards in Blood, Caleb has neck problems so you can't look that far up, meaning gargoyles can often just go right out of your sight. Stone gargoyles take and deal way more damage, but they're much rarer and don't fly around quite as much. The mother spider first appears as a boss enemy, but later on just becomes a rare but normal sight on the last few levels. It does exactly what you would think, spawns hordes of little spiders to chase you and make your vision all blurry. They're pretty annoying and the only real way to deal with them is explosives like the napalm launcher or dynamite. Cerberus is the third boss and he's kind of like a giant hellhound that you have to kill twice, once for each head. I don't know what happened to the third head, but it's actually not that hard. Both the hellhounds and Cerberus are super vulnerable to the Tesla gun. Maybe because dogs and shock collars or something, I don't know man. But as long as you have Tesla ammo, he's basically not a threat. Cerberus also gets reused right before the final boss. The final boss, which is Chernobog, the main demon this whole cult has been worshipping. I say demon, but that's really just a descriptor, like he looks demonic even though in the real world, Chernobog, without the T, was supposedly some kind of dark Slavic god. I say supposedly because some people think the entire figure of Chernobog was invented by the Christians, who documented the Slavic pantheon, as he and the light god Belobog bear a striking resemblance to God and the devil from the Bible. It might be kind of like how if you look into the Prose Edda, which is supposed to be one of the best sources on Norse mythology we have, you can see that a lot of the myths have been adapted in a very Christian way. This has nothing to do with Blood, by the way, I just think it's interesting. Anyway, Chernobog is this big, skinless, horned entity that does stupid damage. I honestly don't even know what his main attack is. It's just so fast and does so much damage that I just had to run anytime I saw him coming around a corner. It's a tough boss fight, although not a very fun one. Anyway, those are the enemies, so what does Caleb have to fight them with? Well, the most basic weapon is the sawed-off shotgun. Each gun in this game has two methods of firing. Usually one uses less ammo and is more focused but does less damage, while the other is the opposite. With the shotgun, you can either shoot at one barrel at a time or shoot both at once. I usually just shot both, except when trying to hit small enemies like spiders or the hands. The Tommy gun has way more range than the shotgun. Its two firing modes are a basic shooting mode, and then one where Caleb whips that thing around from side to side, spraying the entire room with bullets. Useful for clearing out crowds of enemies. Dynamite is a consumable, but you can stack up to 50 at a time, and this game is not at all shy about giving you as much as you need. Firing mode 1 has you simply lighting and then throwing the stick, which explodes on contact. Firing mode 2 has you light it, then press the button again to set it down, where it'll go off after a short time. I only ever really use it to destroy the occasional wall, as the first mode is way better for enemies. The flare gun is actually kinda interesting. Fire mode 1 just shoots a single flare, which sticks onto an enemy, doing continuous damage. Once you stick enough on the enemy, they'll burn to death, and it usually takes like 2 to 3 for small enemies. The second mode has you shoot like a flare grenade or something, I don't know, but it explodes over a wide area and lights every enemy within it on fire. The aerosol can is actually kinda similar in execution. Caleb creates a makeshift flamethrower with a lighter and a spray can. The first firing mode is just shooting fire, which is decent against small enemies but pretty trash against anything else. The second mode is basically the same as the Dynamite's second mode. You light the tip of the spray can on fire and throw it like a grenade, lighting everyone on fire in the vicinity. The napalm launcher is like a better version of all the fire weapons that came before. Its first firing mode is shooting a simple fireball that explodes on contact, killing most small enemies. Its second firing mode is just shooting an even bigger explosion that does more damage and uses more ammo. The Tesla cannon is probably the strongest weapon in the game, doing crazy damage even with its basic firing mode. Its second mode is a charge shot that does heavy damage and also usually stuns the enemy. Alright, now we're getting into the weapons that I didn't really use. So there are remote and proximity bombs in the game, but I never saw them on my little weapon wheel, so I never used them. But you can probably infer how they would have worked. The voodoo doll is really interesting though, because I didn't figure out how to use it until the very end of the game. So there's two spots on the weapon wheel that relate to the dolls, one called Voodoo Doll and one called Life Leech. You would think that by selecting Voodoo Doll, you would pull out a doll, but that's not the case, at least for me. I think this might just be a bug because I'm reading on the wiki that the way they worked for me was actually the opposite of how they're supposed to work. Anyway, for me, I actually had to select the Life Leech on the weapon wheel to use the Voodoo Doll, which has two modes of attack. One is just sticking a pin into the doll, which will damage the closest enemy. If there is no enemy, it'll damage you instead. The second attack is doing some kind of ritual or something, where you sacrifice the doll and all of your remaining Voodoo Doll ammo in exchange for finishing off whatever enemy you last hit with the doll. I'm not completely sure how it works since I didn't really test it much, but that's the idea. Anyway, for me, I had to select Voodoo Doll to use the Life Leech weapon. So I ended up not using either of them till the very end of the game, because I just thought I had missed something. Anyway, the Life Leech is a staff with a skull on the end that shoots out little magic symbols at enemies. From the wiki, I'm gathering that it's supposed to actually leech life from the enemies. Duh, but apparently they removed that from the game at some point. The alternate fire is setting the staff down into the ground, where it'll continue to shoot enemies on its own like a sentry. Besides the weapons, you can also find three types of armor: physical armor, spirit armor, and fire armor. I assume you can probably guess what each one does, but I'm not actually too sure which enemies deal spirit damage and which ones don't. Besides that, you can find 4 other items to use throughout the levels. Doctor's bags allow you to store up to 100 health that you can then later heal whenever you want. Beast vision allows you to see enemies easier in the dark. Kinda useless, to be honest. The diving suit allows you to breathe underwater for a while, and the jump boost allows you to jump really high whenever they're activated. I'm pretty sure none of these are explicitly needed to beat any of the levels, because at least in my case, I often accidentally activated one without realizing and ended up wasting the entire thing. A couple times I thought you needed the jump boost to progress, so when I had wasted mine and already saved post-waste, I ended up using cheats to get more only to find out that I didn't even need it in the first place. You can also find power-ups that last for a short time, like Akimbo Guns that allows you to do double damage but also use double the ammo, the Cloak of Invisibility which causes all enemies to lose aggro on you, or Reflective Shots which makes physical damage bounce off of you right back to enemies. Alright, so if you're not like me and you actually get cutscenes when you play Blood, when you first start the game you would see this cutscene.
Welcome, my son. my slaves.
What is your bidding, Master?
You have failed me. I disavow you all.
What?
I've taken your love. Now I will take your life. Consider my power in a hollow grave.
That bloke in the cowboy hat is Caleb, and the woman who got snatched is Ophelia, his lover. These two, along with those other two that got killed, were the four leaders of the Cabal, the cult who worships Chernobog and who we fight throughout the game. Chernobog successfully killed all four of his inner circle, but for an unknown reason, Caleb rises from the dead, bringing us to the first level.
I live again.
Side note, but I think Caleb is a really fun character because he's just such a horrible person. Like, even though he's fighting the cult now, keep in mind this guy was one of the leaders of the whole thing like a day before. He has no qualms about killing innocents, destroying critical infrastructure, or just in general being a menace if it means he can get his revenge. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, you wake up in a coffin armed with nothing but a pitchfork. Post-death, Caleb looks way cooler than he did in that cutscene. This game kinda has mirrors in it. Like, you can see Caleb in the mirror and he'll move with you, but he's always carrying around two pistols, not whatever weapon you actually have equipped.
It's still impressive though, because a lot of modern games don't attempt to include mirror reflections.
There's 4 main episodes of Blood, each one with 7 to 8 levels within, that you have to beat before reaching the final boss. The first is called The Way of All Flesh. Anyway, level 1 is actually kinda hard, mainly because you're constantly running out of ammo and you don't have any of the good weapons yet. It has you fighting through a funeral home to a train station, which is where level 2 takes place. Level 2 is the first one where you really get a sense for how this game plays out. You have to search around each level for various keys which allow you to progress. There can be quite a few per level. Level 2 ends with Caleb boarding a train. Level 3 takes place on that moving train, which is actually pretty sick. You have to clear the train car by car, again collecting keys and shit. Level 4 takes place in a dark, twisted carnival, which is another really cool setting. I'll say this, the first episode is only rivaled by the last in terms of how cool the settings of the levels are. Episode 5 takes place in an underground temple with ominous chanting in the background. And episode 6 continues that deeper into the temple, which is now lined with traps. The 7th and last episode is a boss fight against your first stone gargoyle, which later just becomes normal, if kinda rare, enemies. After you beat it, Caleb finds Ophelia's dead body tied to a pillar.
Ophelia?
Show yourself! Show yourself!
There's another cutscene here where he burns her body and kills the gargoyle for good. Honestly, watching these cutscenes now, I don't think I missed much by not seeing them. Episode 2 is called Even Death May Die, and now with his lover confirmed dead, Caleb is on the warpath, hunting down Chernobog's other 2 lieutenants, who we saw kill the other 2 Inner Circle members in the opening. It starts out with another really cool level. It's this ship frozen in ice that Caleb boards, then uses to ram into an ice wall blocking his path. That leads the way to a lumber mill, then a nice little hedge maze which took me like 45 minutes to beat. Why did it take me 45 minutes? Not because the enemies were hard or anything, but because I couldn't find this tiny little button hidden on the back of a frozen pool, which then opened up a hatch in the ice on the frozen pool with a key underneath. Okay, buddy. Anyway, you then go into an old hotel followed by a pretty cool old mansion. Underneath the mansion is a set of long and very confusing tunnels that involve a lot more platforming than you're probably used to at this point. Finally, at the end is Chernobog's second lieutenant, which is a mother spider, another enemy that gets thrown at you later. Once the spider is down, you see Caleb eat the heart of his former friend and Inner Circle member before moving on to the third and final lieutenant. The third episode is called Farewell to Arms, and it starts off really cool, with this section in a small French town. It gets even better on level 2 when the town starts getting bombed by the Cabal, even though most of the people you find within the town are Cabal members themselves. You go through the town's sewers and into a hospital, which really has an assisted suicide ward, and then this episode falls off hard. The next two levels are a factory and a hydroelectric dam, which I thought were both super boring levels visually and gameplay wise. The boss of the last level is Cerberus, who killed the last Inner Circle member, so Caleb kills him right back. The final episode though, Dead Reckoning, is one of the best. It begins in a lab filled with demons, then a breeding facility for the fishmen. There's then a really confusing but very fun level where you have to travel between a series of slaughterhouses out in the woods. Past that is a cavern that starts to make you feel like you're descending into hell. The sky is red, the floor is lava, and there's hellhounds everywhere. There's another temple after that which leads to visually the best level in the game. You end up in this plane made entirely of flesh. The sound design here is just insane too. You can hear the mouths around you breathing, the flesh squelching, and the assholes farting. You have to climb the flesh pillars and swim through digestive juices to reach the final level of the game, Chernobog's Throne. At first he throws the three former boss enemies at you, a stone gargoyle, a mother spider, and a Cerberus, before appearing himself in the flesh. Prior to this level, you see a cutscene where Chernobog explains why he killed his Inner Circle. It seems he was the one who brought Caleb back from the dead, explicitly for the purpose of killing all of the members of his cult, and accumulating all of their combined power into one being, Caleb, who could then be sacrificed to allow Chernobog to bring hell on Earth. It probably would have worked too if he hadn't killed Ophelia, because as it stands, Caleb kills his former god, although he's probably not actually dead since there is a Blood 2 that came out a couple years later. But anyway, that was Blood, a very fun shooter game with some horror themes sprinkled in here and there. If you want to check out Blood yourself, just buy the version on Steam so you don't have to deal with no cutscenes and the weird ass control scheme that I did. Sanitarium dropped in 1998 and it's really good. You should check it out. You can just go buy it on Steam. It's another point-and-click adventure game, but a much more traditional one than Phantasmagoria. The story of Sanitarium is insane and confusing at the start and middle, but the more you play, the more you start to understand what's actually going on in this game and what it all means. Far and away the best part about Sanitarium is the visuals. The graphical style is somewhat typical of what you could expect from adventure games from the 90s, but the art direction is amazing. This game only runs at 16 FPS, which sounds like it would be horrible to play, but the game is designed around that frame rate, so it actually ends up looking really good. This game has like 5 entirely distinct visual styles that it messes around with. Some of them definitely hit a little more than others, but visually, none of them are bad. As an adult playing this in 2025, this game isn't super scary, but if I was a kid playing this, I would have been terrified.
No! You're dead!
Your tenacity is quite remarkable, you know. Your doctor tells me that you should have died in the car wreck. I wish things could have worked out differently, Max, but they didn't.
Not that a kid could beat Sanitarium, I mean maybe, but some of the puzzles are a little obscure. Unlike the art style, the voice acting isn't really that great. The main character, Max, kinda sounds like Hank Hill to me.
Maybe you're not as bright as I thought.
You know, I think I figured you out. You're not interested in a cure. You just want hope to bring you more prestige, more money. You smart bastard. Give me back my department, otherwise I'll leave. I'll take my research with me and find a company that's more concerned with finding a cure than filling its pockets.
Which is interesting, but some of them do a good job, like the voice actor for Dr. Morgan, the overarching villain of the game.
No, it's all right. Those cutbacks are based solely on existing statistics. The truth is that it's difficult to measure the success of your research against the proven methods of the Hope treatment. Look, you don't have to leave Mercy to continue with your project. I'll look over the numbers again. We'll work something out.
So when it comes to Sanitarium, there's not much to discuss when it comes to gameplay. You basically hold down right click to move around, then left click on things to interact with them. Unlike a lot of these games, there's no real indication of what you can and can't interact with, so you kind of just have to click on everything. You use items from your inventory by clicking on your character, and those actually will start glowing when you hover them over something that they can be used on, so that's nice. A lot of this game is solving puzzles. Some of them just have you clicking on things like normal, but most take you into a separate screen just for the puzzle. Some of them are just trial and error, like one at the end which is literally just that, or one where you have to repeat a melody you hear in the level on these little grubs. Some other ones are pretty involved though, like when you have to use the wings of a little bug strapped to a machine to put the right pictures onto screens. There are also technically combat sections in this game, but there also really isn't. I'll talk about it a little later. The main menu of this game has this super insane design to it. It looks so sick. And anytime you hover over one of the options on the menu, you hear a ghostly child's voice say whatever that option is. It's cool.
Keyboard configuration. Return to game.
Anyway, I'm not going to give a sequential recap of the story of this game, because that would take too long and it wouldn't make any sense. Basically how this game works is, you play as Max, a man with a bandaged face and no memories. You wake up in an asylum with no idea of what you're doing there. By talking to orderlies, you can learn that you apparently stole one of the nurse's cars and took it on a joyride in an escape attempt, only to crash the car, ruin your face, and lose all your memories. As you play the game, Max starts to remember more and more about himself, and realizes what he's actually doing here. I'll tell you all that in a minute, but in between levels in the actual asylum, you get these strange and seemingly completely unrelated dream sequences. Those are really what I want to talk about since they're far and away the best part of this game. So I'll give a rundown of the 4 dream settings and the stories that take place within them, then at the end reveal what they mean and what's actually happening in this game. The first one is my favorite. Max wakes up in a sleepy old small American town with no adults in it. The only remaining residents of the town are children of these missing adults. However, when you speak to them, you start to notice they all have strange deformities. Many are just facial deformities, like a kid with 2 mouths, one with a kind of burned appearance, or another that seems to have had his head sink into his neck.
Everyone calls me Lumpy.
They're not just focused on the face though. You can find a girl who's missing both legs, a boy with 3 arms, and another whose legs have turned into strange root-like appendages. Talking to these kids reveals precious little about what's happening here, but they all reference some kind of being known as Mother. Mother made their parents go away, and Mother gave them these gifts that deformed them. You can play little games with the kids like tic-tac-toe or hide-and-seek.
I guess you're not.
The latter of which reveals what happened to the parents. They're all dead inside the schoolhouse. The kids don't seem to care, commenting that Max should leave as Mother doesn't like adults. It's a super intriguing mystery, and I love how even the kids who aren't little assholes still aren't on your side. No one ever asks you for help or complains about the gifts Mother gave them, and not a single one of these kids cares whether Max lives or dies. As you explore the town, you find newspaper fragments from the weeks leading up to the adult's death, and they reveal more or less what happened here. A comet crashed into the barn of one of the residents, causing massive vines to erupt from the barn, spreading throughout the entire town, but focused primarily on the town's famous pumpkin patch. The town's preacher, who had been elected interim mayor to handle this crisis, forbids the townspeople from cutting down these vines. When Max jumps through enough hoops to reach the pumpkin patch, you have one of these weird little combat sections where you have to click on enemies fast enough before they damage you. There's like 2 of these in the whole game. If you ever lose at them, you just go back to the beginning with your progress saved, so there's really no challenge here. At the end of it though is a possessed scarecrow, which you beat by destroying the magic pumpkins that control it. Honestly, I don't know what that has to do with the overarching story of this part. Once you find the barn that the comet landed in, you finally find Mother.
Oh my god!
She's an alien, a plant-based form of life that was carried on board the comet to our planet. Mother killed all the adults because, in her words, they're meat. She still believes that the children can be saved though, so these deformities she's giving them will eventually result in them turning into plants. It's a pretty cool plotline that would have made a fire B movie, but Max ends up killing Mother only to awaken back in the asylum with no knowledge of what happened in between.
Theories on how music.
What's your theory?
Well, I think that maybe your mind couldn't handle the thought of you abandoning those who needed help, so you constructed a world to hide in, inside your mind, until it was safe to come back. The town represented the tower, the children were the patients, and the missing adults represented the doctors and other authority figures who weren't around to help.
Huh, maybe you're right, but it all seemed so real.
The next one has you playing as Max's sister, Sarah. Prior to this chapter, you see a cutscene which reveals that Sarah died when Max was a child from an unknown disease. I don't think we know exactly when this game is set, but Sarah probably died in like the 60s or 70s. Anyway, Sarah loved circuses. Her favorite toy was a little clown that she got from one her and Max went to. The bedridden Sarah asks Max to bring her this toy, but as Max tries to find it, she dies behind him, leaving Max with a lifetime of guilt for not being able to fulfill his sister's last wish. Anyway, this chapter has Sarah wash up on the shore of an island where the circus is currently in town. This one is a close second to the pumpkin one. I love nightmare circus settings, and this level knocks it out of the park. You'll notice that the circus is on an island seemingly in the middle of nowhere with no customers, and that's not just a coincidence. By talking to the various performers, the owner of the circus, and a family of refugees, you learn that the circus had actually posted up on a mountain just outside of a pretty decent sized town. That was until the town's dam broke from years of neglect, washing the entire town away, except for the circus, which was just high enough to avoid that fate. So why hasn't anyone sailed out and found help for the town? Well, one of the freaks from the circus was a squid man, half squid, half man, and when the water came, he managed to escape his cage. From weeks of feeding on fish in his new habitat, the squid man grew to a massive size, large enough that fish couldn't sate him anymore. The squid man started picking people off the island at night, getting big enough eventually that he could sink any ship that tried to leave the island and eat everyone on board. The environment of this level is super drab and hopeless, and yet many of these performers are still doing their little acts. There's a mix of attitudes among the performers, all of which know that they're probably going to die soon, either by starvation or by the squid man. Many of the clowns are just assholes, and they want nothing to do with a little kid in their last moments on the earth.
My name's Sarah.
Like guy.
Like guy?
Yeah, like I give a rat's ass you named Sarah.
Many others, though, are kinda chill, like the guy who runs the circus. He gives you a free pass to play a couple games, probably just to entertain both you and the guys running the games. The fire breather decides to teach you how to breathe fire. Even though you two just met, she decides you're like the daughter she never got to have. The strongman is in love with the fire breather but doesn't know how to tell her. You can try to set them up by convincing the strongman to get a tattoo of her name on his arm, which is a great way to get a girl to like you. I would say visually this level is my favorite, however unlike the first level, there's really no mystery to unravel here. You learn very early on that the squid man is out there, which tells you right away that you'll end up beating this level by killing it. The end of the level is another weird combat section where you have to fire breathe on the squid man and his tentacles enough times to kill him and move on. After some more asylum levels, you get probably the weirdest of the 4 dream sequences.
This thing has some kind of mechanical harness. Wearing this harness, perhaps they'll think I'm one of them.
You wake up as a strange, 4-armed, goat-legged Cyclops creature in a giant flesh bug hive. By talking to other Cyclopses around, you learn that you are Grimwall, an ancient hero of their people. This one basically takes place in the comic book that Max read as a kid, and in this world there was 2 sentient species on their planet. One is the Cyclops, which are basically just humans, and the other is the insects, a hive mind of sentient insects. The Cyclops have a legend they tell of the War of the One, where the creators of their world pitched the 2 species against each other in a massive war. Whoever won would get to rule the world and the other would be forced underground forever. Grimwall fought in that war and is the reason why the Cyclops won. Anyway, in the modern day, the bugs re-emerged. The Cyclops sent an entomologist named Gromna to infiltrate the hive and find a way to defeat the insects once again. Given that the Cyclops fought an ancient war against bugs, the field of entomology is very looked down upon, but now it's Gromna's time to shine and save the world. Well, what you end up finding out about Gromna is that he did not forget the decades of bullying he endured for his interest in bugs, and he's betrayed his people in favor of the insects. Apparently he told the Cyclops Peace Council, which is a weird name for a group that later fires a nuke at the insects, but he told them that the insects have agreed to a truce. On Peace Day, the Insect Queen and the Cyclops Peace Council will meet and discuss terms of peace between the 2 species. In reality, Gromna has been outfitting the bugs with cybernetics that make them fast enough to overwhelm and destroy the Peace Council before they can even think about launching their nukes. To fuel this technology, Gromna has been growing thousands of clones of himself, which are first used for experiments, then later cast into the fire of the bug's furnace to make more cybernetics. The bugs are convinced that Gromna is their savior, but you learn that he's in this for himself. Gromna believes that by combining Cyclops with Insect he can make himself immortal, then using his new insect army to conquer the world. It's a super comic booky plotline, but the visuals are pretty great. The insect hive is entirely biomechanical. They have certain technological solutions like scanners and such to identify insect ranks, but they have other biological solutions like travel sphincters and machines that are operated by strapping a little bug into a little torture device. The bugs are completely blind from their time underground, so all you have to do to navigate the place is upgrade your own security clearance, which is the only way bugs identify each other now. You would think they would still be able to tell you're not a bug by your smell, but maybe Gromna already replaced that part of them. Anyway, yeah, on its own the story of this one is kinda lame, but the visuals are pretty cool, if slightly headache-inducing. The story ends with Grimwall unplugging the Bug Queen, which allows the Peace Council to nuke their hive, exterminating the species and Gromna in the process. The last and final dream setting has you playing as a stone-skinned Aztec deity named Olmec, which as far as I can tell is a made-up being. He's kinda fun though because unlike Grimwall, he actually has a personality, and it's usually being really rude and demeaning.
What do you mean by that, bitter crone? I am Olmec. Yes, you have the necklace that belongs to his wife. Give it to her, or I will shatter your limbs like twigs. Find it. Enough groveling, chieftain.
He doesn't mean it though, he's just a little stone cat guy. Anyway, visually speaking, this is definitely the most boring of all the dream settings. It all takes place in a tiny village with a few tiny temples in it. The end does have a kind of entertaining maze section, but that's about it. The story here is that Quetzalcoatl returned from the dead only to attack this village and kill almost everyone inside. As a last-ditch effort, the villagers summoned you, but the survivors aren't super keen to help you as almost everyone they care about is already dead. You have to help them out, either by helping their ghosts get closure, or helping the few remaining villagers defeat the Serpent God. It's pretty short compared to the other three, but rather than a combat section like the first two had, you have to navigate this maze with falling platforms and electric floors to beat the level. You end the level by ripping a death mask off the Serpent Man's face, which allows Olmec to tackle him into lava and send him back to the world of the dead. All in all, I think this one is the weakest of the four. The only good part about this level is Olmec himself. He's kinda funny. The Asylum levels in between are usually pretty short. I think the most striking one is where you find Dr. Morgan's lab and the horrible experiments he's been doing within. Dr. Morgan seems like a comically evil person at this point, but in reality, he's not. His evil is actually very realistic. So in reality, none of this game is real, neither the Asylum parts or the dream sequences. Max is in a coma. But why exactly is he dreaming this in particular? Well, here's the real story of Sanitarium. All over the world, children are dying from a strange new illness called DNAV. The only cure for this illness comes from Dr. Morgan's Mercy Foundation in the form of a drug called Hope. DNAV is a disease with a near 100% fatality rate, so this Hope drug is a miracle, right? Well, no, it's not, because it doesn't work. Hope only slows down the progression of the disease. Max's own daughter is infected with DNAV, and his only hope is the Hope drug. But Max isn't happy with the results. Max is actually a medical researcher as well. When he was in his first year at med school, Dr. Morgan was in his last and they became colleagues. So with his daughter's life on the line, Max goes to the Mercy Foundation and asks for a job, where Morgan puts him on the Hope team. It's there that Max discovers that Hope is basically useless trash and starts researching his own cure for the disease. Morgan learns of this and cuts most of Max's funding until he gets back to working on the Hope drug. Morgan claims this is because they need to focus on what they know works, rather than this theoretical cure, but Max thinks it's because he's greedy and wants the money from the Hope drug's sales. Max agrees but continues working on his own cure in his own time, pulling overtime at the Mercy Foundation, until he eventually figures it out. Max downloads the data onto a DVD with the intent of showing off this cure to everyone at the Foundation, but Morgan can't allow that. Morgan sabotages Max's car, leading to a car wreck which leaves Max in a coma in the hospital. It's there that Morgan tries to poison Max's IV.
Old friend. Did you honestly expect me to sit by while you went public with your cure? No. I've worked much, much too hard to allow that. I guess this is goodbye, Max.
Leading to the last two levels of the game where you need to play as all four characters to get past various obstacles. Olmec is used to get past obstacles like lava and shit, Grimwall to break things with his strength, and Sarah to climb into small spaces. It's a cool level. The final boss fight has you navigating a chessboard while on a time limit. If you don't reach these 3 orbs in time, Max dies in the real world, but each time this black goo touches you, it sends you back to the start of the chessboard. It's a decent little puzzle. Anyway, Max survives and wakes up from the hospital where he shows his new cure to his colleagues. The Mercy Foundation mass produces this new cure, and Max's daughter, and every other kid that gets the DNAV disease, is saved. Morgan resigns from the Mercy Foundation and Max is appointed head. The FBI ends up finding proof of Morgan's attempt to kill Max and arrest him. Yay, good ending. So if Max was in a coma the whole time, what the fuck was the point of the entire game? Well, let's go through each dream level and what they actually mean. The first one represents Max's fight against the DNAV virus. Mother represents the virus, this evil thing that's actively hurting the children, which represent Max's daughter and of course all the children of the world. Max killing Mother represents him finding the cure. The second is Max's guilt in not being able to save his sister from DNAV, which we can assume is what she died from. Of course he was just a little kid back then, so there's no way he could have saved her. This level is just him letting go of that guilt and realizing that. The third level is the most clear. Gromna is Dr. Morgan, a man willing to sacrifice the lives of children for his own gain. Gromna wanted immortality, and in a way that's what Dr. Morgan wanted too. Max accuses him of being in it just for the money, but I don't think that's the full story. Of course Morgan would become filthy rich off the constant need of DNAV children's parents to purchase his drug, but I think it was more about Morgan being the one to cure DNAV, making him go down in history as the man who cured this horrible disease. So even though the Hope drug wasn't very good at fighting DNAV, Morgan insisted that the Mercy Foundation continue to research it over any new solution because he wasn't the one that came up with them. Like I said, he's not the comically evil mad doctor Max portrays him as in the Asylum levels, he's a very real kind of bad person. The last level represents Max overcoming Dr. Morgan, who was trying to stifle his research. Olmec's whole thing is his resilience, so Max had to be resilient in the face of budget cuts and an attempted assassination from his former friend. In the end, Olmec beats Quetzalcoatl, just like Max ends up beating Morgan in the end. So yeah, it was all just a dream, but it's a dream meant to help you understand the real story behind Max and Dr. Morgan. The story of this game is definitely interesting, but the real reason you play this game is for the crazy visuals and weird settings. Nocturne is a survival horror game that released in 1999, and it's a game that I have a very mixed opinion on. But first, let me give you an introduction to Nocturne. This game is set in the late 20s, early 30s. You play as Stranger, a mysterious monster hunter that we never really learn anything about. We likely would have gotten to know him a little more in the sequel, which never came out, but I think he's a super fun protagonist anyway. He actually kind of looks like Caleb from Blood. And there's also a level on a moving train. But they're pretty different characters. I love Stranger because he just does not give a fuck about pleasantries. He talks to his commander, a US general, a mob boss, and a monster he's about to kill the exact same way.
A partner? Who?
Svetlana Lupescu. I know you really don't like her,
I don't
stranger,
like anyone. I hate monsters. What the hell? Crazy bitch. You mean...
The Dead Walk.
So? You know your dark past is not so secret in my realm. I know all about you. Fascinating.
General Biggs, I would like you to meet our top operative, General Biggs, the Stranger.
The Stranger, huh? You aren't hiding something that we should know, are you, soldier?
Nothing that need concern you.
Stranger works for a secretive US agency called Spook House. They're responsible for handling any paranormal occurrences that happen around the world. Spook House employs a host of their own monsters, who Stranger hates even more than other humans, but he's constantly forced to work with them to accomplish Spook House's goals. Stranger is consistently the best part about this game. His voice actor does such a good job at playing this character that you can't help but love him, even though he doesn't have too many lines. Anyway, I think Nocturne is one of the best and worst survival horror games I've ever played. So it's a fixed camera angle tank control game, as you would expect from a 1999 survival horror game. I'm pretty neutral on that combination. I think it can be done well, like with many of the early Resident Evil games, and it can be done poorly, like with Nocturne. Nocturne's camera angles are absolutely diabolical. One of the most consistent problems with the camera in this game is that the angles give you zero perspective on where you are compared to where you just were. It's super easy to just run around in circles in this game, because you can't tell where you came from and where you need to go. The way you get around this is by not focusing on the environment, but rather focusing on Stranger and what direction he's facing. You know that if you just exited one camera scene and entered another, Stranger's back will be to that previous scene. You get the hang of it after a while, but it's never not annoying. You also consistently can't see enemies. So in this game, you can either toggle auto-aim or try to do it yourself. Definitely don't do that latter option, as that might as well be a challenge run. The auto-aim is pretty decent, although it can take a minute to find enemies, which can be a problem if they're currently chewing Stranger's face off. Anyway, the only way to know whether there's an enemy off-screen is by the sound cue, and then the only way to know where exactly they are is by pulling out a weapon and letting Stranger auto-aim at them. It works fine, but it's kinda lame. I'll talk more about the combat later, but far and away the worst thing about the camera is that it actively tries to kill you. Like, I'm not even joking with this shit, man. This game has a ton of platforming in it and a ton of falls to your death along the way. The camera in this game loves nothing more than not showing you where these falls are. Like, so many times there will be a doorway at the edge of the screen that you can't see into, so you walk into it only to find that there was no floor in that doorway and you're now dead. It happens so fucking much, man. You basically should save your game before entering any new room. That brings me to my second main complaint. Who in their right mind thought that having platforming in your fixed camera angle, tank control having game was a good idea? It's not even like an occasional thing either. Platforming is a huge part of Nocturne. Remember, my friends, how tank controls work. You can press W to move forward and S to move backwards. The way you move side to side is by pressing A or D, which turns you in that direction, then you once again have to press W to move in that new direction. This game actually does have a strafing mode you can toggle, but you have to toggle it on, which then prevents you from being able to turn. Anyway, it's a control scheme that is not ideal for precise movements, and yet that's exactly what Nocturne wants out of you. It's not so bad in the first and third chapters of the game, but in the second it becomes a big part of the game, and the fourth is like half platforming, the other half puzzle solving. It's very bad, and it only gets worse when the game's camera refuses to give you a good view of the things you're supposed to be platforming onto. Jumping in this game in general is pretty trash. You really have two options: a standing jump, which has Stranger jump like 2 inches off the ground, or a running jump, which has Stranger become an Olympic long jump competitor. With the standing jump, you almost always have to just creep your way onto the very edge of whatever you're jumping off, and Stranger will usually just barely make it to the edge of what you're jumping to. Running jumps work better, but it's super hard to line them up while also not flying right off the other edge of what you're jumping on. I have more complaints that are more level specific, but my final main complaint can't actually be blamed on Nocturne itself. It's honestly less of a complaint and more of a warning to you if you plan on playing Nocturne. There is no official remaster or re-release of Nocturne on modern hardware, so the only way to play it is to either go and find yourself a high-end computer from 1999 and a Nocturne disc, or play a fan repack for Windows 10 and 11. Of course, I have nothing but gratitude for the great people who go out of their way to repackage old games so that losers with a tiny YouTube channel like me can play them. But what the hell happened with this one, man? This game is so insanely buggy on modern hardware, so right off the bat, anytime you want to pause the game, you better have 10 minutes set aside. And God bless your soul if you want to resume after pausing. I'm just kidding, it's not quite that bad, but it can genuinely be like a minute-long wait before the menu pops up or goes away. So to avoid all that, you can just press F6 and F9 to quick save and quick load. And while it definitely is quicker than opening that fuck-ass menu, it still takes a while to quick load a save. Cutscenes are also constantly breaking in this game as characters will get stuck on the scenery. The only way to get around this is to either just skip the cutscene, which I obviously didn't want to do, especially when the final scene of the last chapter got stuck, or you can reload a save and try to position Stranger better, assuming he was the one that got stuck, which isn't always the case. There's a lot of other bugs that can happen in the moment-to-moment gameplay, like falling through the floor or ascending to heaven, but they're much less frequent. There was this one thing that happened to me where I don't even know if it was a bug or if this is just a thing in the original game. Basically, at the very end of the third chapter, you have to pull 2 levers which will cause a chemical vat to start detonating. So you have to get out of there before Stranger blows up, except I literally couldn't. It was not physically possible for me to escape the explosions while also not burning to death. I looked up a walkthrough and the advice was to just run like hell, which simply didn't work. So I found a YouTube video where a guy did the 2 switches in the opposite order, which resulted in him not blowing up, except I had already saved after flicking the first switch, so I was just fucked and would have had to restart the entire chapter. So anyway, I never finished the third chapter of Nocturne. Alright, I just did a lot of complaining. I can't guarantee that it'll stop completely, but the combat in Nocturne is actually decent. It's not perfect, but it's honestly kind of fun. This game has a much bigger focus on combat than other similar games from the time period, which makes sense because you're a seasoned monster hunter, not some loser looking for his wife or a rookie cop. A big part of Nocturne is knowing what weapons to use against what enemies. For example, your basic pistols can have 4 different kind of bullets: ordinary bullets, silver bullets, aqua vampira bullets, and mercury bullets. I actually don't know what mercury bullets do, but silver is great at killing werewolves while aqua vampira is great for vampires. It goes a little deeper than that though, as you can one-shot almost any vampire with the crossbow and stake launcher. The crossbow has a kind of similar lineup of bolts, normal bolts, silver bolts, and holy bolts. But if you use the stake launcher and precisely aim at the chest of a vampire, it's an insta-kill. You can actually set the game to allow you to use the mouse to adjust Stranger's aim as well, which makes it easier. To be honest, the whole weapon and ammo swapping is most important in the first chapter, which is my favorite. Is basically non-existent in the middle two, then comes back in the last one. This game is not at all sparing with the ammo it gives you in every chapter except the last one, where you almost never have enough ammo. The first two though just provide you with an excess of ammo, enough to miss like half your shots and still have enough. The third gives you a basically endless supply of ammo as you fight zombie mobsters who drop Tommy guns that you can rearm from. Overall, the combat in this game is pretty simple, although it's weirdly satisfying in like a mobile game type of way. Like most of the time you kind of just stand there and hold down spacebar as Stranger guns down everything in his path, auto-aiming the entire way. That's not always the case as the game loves to swarm you with enemies. You don't really have any way to deal with swarms besides just out-healing them and slowly backing up to avoid taking too many attacks. This game is even more generous with healing items than it is with ammo. You find doctor's bags, healing tonics, and alcohol all over the place, all of which will automatically heal you when you get low. To be honest, the first 3 chapters of this game are almost like an item-based RPG or something. Like as long as you have enough ammo to kill the enemies and enough healing to survive their attacks, there's no difficulty. That's not always the case, like some enemies you can't let close to you because they'll grab you, like zombies and imps, and if they do grab you, it doesn't really do that much damage, but what it does do is prevent you from shooting the other zombies closing in on you. Pretty much any enemy can be brute force down, but some require more thought than others, and are also kinda buggy. Gargoyles, for example, are completely invincible while stone, but very vulnerable while they're not. However, anytime you look at them, they turn back to stone, so you kind of have to bait them out. It's a similar story with the succubus enemies, except rather than turning to stone, they just teleport if it looks like there's even a slight chance that you're going to shoot at them. What you have to do is bait out their attacking mode, where they fly straight at you and try to grab you. In that mode, it's super easy to hit them with a stake right to the heart, which is a one-shot. I already mentioned that I think the first chapter is the best, so let's go into each. The first chapter has Stranger plunge into the remote German countryside in search of a vampire lord who's oppressing the town's people near his castle. Your partner for this mission is Svetlana, this goth half-vampire lady who, unlike the other companion you get later, is actually pretty great in combat. The enemies for this chapter are pretty typical gothic horror monsters. You have a range of monstrous vampires, some that look more like man-bats and some that are like full bat creatures. There's ghouls, which are a recurring enemy. They're super weak, but they usually don't die for good the first time you down them. There are also gargoyles and their much larger cousins, sentinels, which only appear in this chapter as they're the foot soldiers of the vampire lord. There is also a shitload of werewolves. One cool thing about this chapter is that some of the events of it change depending on whether you talk to certain NPCs or not. The biggest example of that is that you can talk to a cowering man in town to learn that there's a woodsman named Yuri out there who can help you. So you show up to Yuri's door and he's a pretty chill guy, arming you with a crossbow and a shitload of ammo and supplies. You actually don't have Svetlana with you for very long in this chapter. She ends up getting mind-controlled by the vampire lord, but she's still a lot better than the other companion. To make a long story short, Stranger infiltrates the old castle and kills the vampire lord in a monstrous bat form, which is actually one of the very few boss fights in this game. You then learn that the mayor in town who put you up to this is actually the vampire lord's father. He was forced out of his own castle by his son and now used us to kill his son and get his castle back.
The Count was your son?
Yes, that insolent bastard. Now that you've killed him, my people and I can return home to this castle.
Stranger, put your guns away.
You know I have no sense of humor.
I'm not joking, stranger.
You'd be wise to do as your friend says.
I have no friends.
Stranger is down to fight this guy too, but Svetlana stops him and says they can save him for later.
But he's a blood-sucking vampire. As soon as we leave, he'll be out looking for more food and new brides. Innocent humans will have their lives torn apart.
We'll deal with him when the time is right. But there's nothing the two of us can do about it now, alone. Throwing ourselves at him would be suicide, so calm down. Besides, you already got to kill a really powerful vampire today, so cheer up.
I would actually say the peak of Chapter 2 is way higher than the best of Chapter 1, but it kind of falls off towards the end. Stranger is headed to a small Texas town to investigate reports of rising dead there. Level 1 takes place on a train which gets attacked by werewolves. It's a decent level. The one after that, though, is easily the best part of this game. You arrive in the Texas town to find that it is indeed infested with zombies. Stranger revives another spookhouse operative named Scat. He's like, I don't know, like the host to some strange god or demon or something that revives Scat at will and will later help you. Anyway, the town's preacher puts Stranger up to saving all of the remaining townspeople. This part is so sick. You have to run back and forth through the town, killing hordes of zombies along the way, and escorting the people of the town as you find them. Some of them, like this elderly couple, are slow as hell too, so you have to walk at their pace, all the while watching out for zombies which could easily kill you and them.
Do you even care if we make it to the church alive?
Marginally.
It's super fun and the visuals are amazing. It really kind of captures the old Western horror vibe it was going for. The level after takes place in a mine and it's decent, but then this chapter falls off hard as Stranger becomes Indiana Jones and explores a strange tomb underneath the town that holds some kind of eldritch bug god inside. This part sucks, because the bugs have like 2 enemy types, compared to like 7 from the first chapter, and this part has you solving a ton of puzzles and doing a ton of platforming, usually at the same time. You don't even end up killing the bug god, you just put it to sleep with the help of Scat. Super lame ending to what could have been the best chapter in the game. Chapter 3 also has very little enemy variety, but unlike all other chapters, the enemies actually shoot back in this one. Stranger is off to Chicago where Al Capone has employed a German scientist to bring back dead mobsters as giant Frankenstein-like creatures. Spookhouse learned about this from a mobster named Icepick, who turns out to be one of the Franken mobsters himself. This chapter is kind of the opposite of Chapter 2. It starts off horrible but ends up getting pretty good. The only enemy types in this entire act are mobsters with Tommy guns and mobsters without. Both can be zombies which have slightly more health. I would love to shit on it, but it's actually kind of fun, because the Tommy gun is an insanely satisfying weapon to use.
Let's see you dance.
Anyway, Icepick is that companion I was talking about earlier. So he's a big lumbering zombie man, right? We all have our flaws. The problem is that the first level has these cars patrolling around the level looking for Stranger. If they see you, they drop off a couple mobsters for you to kill, but if they hit you, it's an insta-kill. Well, it's also an insta-kill if they hit Icepick's big ass, which is a game over. So you have to specifically orient yourself so the Icepick won't be in the middle of the road when the cars come. It's way more annoying than I'm making it sound, I swear. Anyway, this chapter gets good again when you raid this mob-operated theater and have a boss fight at the end, then kind of falls off again as you spend the next few levels in a chemical factory. They're not bad levels, just very visually boring. The fourth and final chapter is far and away the worst in my opinion. This chapter takes all the worst parts of the previous chapters and rolls them all into one. So the premise is that an old spookhouse operator named Killian is having monster troubles on his estate. So Stranger pulls up to solve them, only to find that it was a trap and Killian has betrayed Spookhouse.
Black magic. Killian knows black magic. His little monster problem reeks of foul play. I think it's time to have a little chat with the old man.
Well done, stranger.
Skip it, Killian. What's your game?
I'm afraid I don't follow.
That was black magic raising those monsters. The same kind of magic you studied at Spookhouse.
Very clever, stranger. You would be a most worthy subject.
What's that supposed to mean?
Killian has a deep hatred of monsters stemming from when a vampire killed his wife. So once Spookhouse started employing them, he started working against them. Killian sticks you in a massive saw trap of a mansion and you have to find your way out. This level also has the most platforming of any of them. but I've already complained about that enough. When the house section of this level starts out, you don't even have a weapon, but the game still throws enemies at you, expecting you to dodge around them or use the traps to kill them. It's a cool idea, but it gets to a point where you literally don't have enough resources to deal with all the enemies it throws at you. That's not really a problem in a game like Resident Evil, where most of the enemies are slow, shambling zombies, but in this game the enemies are fast, man. I had 2 separate instances where I just had to juke enemies to rush to an objective and activate it, before the 4 werewolves or imps or whatever caught up with me. Luckily the second time you end up freeing the spookhouse operator named Moloch. He's a demon and he just explodes all the enemies that were harassing me before, then ends the level.
Help me! Get this fiend off me!
If there's anything you want to say to this man, stranger, say it now. He's on his way to a hell worse than the one that spawned me.
Stranger, wait! Come back! Aren't you going to help me?
The main problem here is that this game is very much not made for you to run from enemies. You're meant to fight them, which is great until you're not meant to and the game can't accommodate that new playstyle. I think this level had potential and would have been great if Nocturne didn't have the gameplay style and control scheme that it does. There's also a little epilogue where you find all the spookhouse destroyed and its operatives killed, hinting at some enemy from Stranger's past that's come back to haunt him. Sounds cool, right? Well, I didn't get to play it because of that whole Chapter 3 thing, and there was never a sequel anyway, so. Now for the important question. Is Nocturne scary? No, but to be honest, it's about as scary as most old survival horror games are. Maybe slightly less scary because of how combat focused this game is. Like, it's kinda hard to be scared when you're playing as the badass stranger who kills everything in his path. But anyway, that was Nocturne. If they ever release a remaster or just release a less buggy of this game on modern hardware, you should totally check it out. If for nothing else, check it out because Stranger is a super fun character. The final game featured in this video is probably the most modern feeling of them all. American Mcgee's Alice, released in 2000 for the PC, although where most people probably played it was the remastered version released with the game's sequel, Alice Madness Returns in 2011. Anyway, Alice 2000 is a third-person action game, a far cry from point-and-click adventures, boomer shooters, or tank control games. Now the thing about that is, I kind of have trouble classifying this game as a horror. Like, this game is super tonally inconsistent, which is probably intentional. Half of this game is frolicking through the whimsical landscapes of Wonderland, while the other half is like dark industrial asylums and schools full of tortured children. Like, it's kinda crazy. Anyway, when I selected this game for this video, it was mainly because of the name. I was like, who the fuck is American Mcgee? Like, that can't be a real person, right? Well, it is, and I highly suggest you read this guy's Wikipedia page. His life story is kinda crazy. Like, what do you mean when he was 16, his mom sold their house to run off with her trans girlfriend to get her gender confirmation surgery? Anyway, American would eventually become a lead level designer at id Software where he worked on games like Doom 2 and Quake, until he was fired, which also seems like a pretty interesting story. Anyway, he ended up at EA where he made American Mcgee's Alice, obviously. But what's interesting is that it seems like the naming was entirely EA's decision, as they thought his name was weird and unique and might draw people in. American Mcgee aside, is this game good? Yes. Is it scary? It would have been if I played this when I was like 12, which I think was the point. Alice is rated M, but I think it's pretty clearly a game for younger teenagers. But to sum up the plot of this game, after her original adventures in Wonderland, Alice's house burned down, resulting in the deaths of both of her parents. Alice ended up in a catatonic state and was committed to an asylum, where she then gets pulled back into Wonderland.
Save us, Alice!
But it's not the whimsical plane it once was. Wonderland is now a place of darkness and suffering, and it's up to you to fix that. Of course, the whole point of Alice in Wonderland, even in the original 2 books, is that Wonderland is entirely in Alice's imagination. So the reason that Wonderland now sucks is that Alice's mind is so messed up from the accident and years spent in the asylum. It's not really clear how old Alice is in this game, but I would guess like mid-teens. That's also why it's only half messed up. Like, some of Alice's childlike wonder is still there, it's just hidden under the weight of what happened to her. Anyway, this game still has some really cool stuff in it that I want to talk about. But first let me walk you through my own insanity that was induced by trying to play this game. So if you just buy Alice Madness Returns on Steam, You get the remastered version of this game, which is far and away the easiest and best way to play it. However, if you've watched this far, you should remember that I played a fucked up and cutscene-less version of the game Blood, simply for the reason that I didn't want to play a remaster, so of course I had to do the same for Alice. From what I've seen online, it actually seems like you can edit some of the files from the remaster to get it to load the original models and shit, but I still wanted to get as close as I could to an authentic 2000 playthrough of Alice. So I downloaded another repack. This one actually basically worked out of the box, but I don't know what American Mcgee was smoking when he made the cutscenes for this game, because I couldn't record them with OBS like I usually do. So on OBS you can either record your entire display, or choose certain windows to capture. I usually do the latter. Well, I guess Mr. Mcgee thought it was optimal to have Alice open a separate window in front of your actual game window to play each cutscene. At least that's what I think is happening, because on the recording all you can see is a still frame with a cutscene rolling under the footage, while on my screen I could just see the cutscene. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it was super weird. So the solution of course would be to just record the entire display, except for some reason nothing would show in the recording if Alice was in full screen, like literally just a black screen. So of course the solution then is to just play in windowed mode, except of course the game from 2000 doesn't go up to my monitor's resolution of 1440. The repack actually comes with 720p widescreen support, so I decided I would just change my monitor's resolution to 720 and play the game like that. That worked for a while until for some reason, and I genuinely don't know why, Alice stopped capturing my mouse. So I would be playing the game, fighting enemies or whatever, then my mouse would go outside the window and I would end up right-clicking on the desktop or accidentally moving the window around. What's even weirder is that I fixed that by setting my monitor resolution back to 1440 and just playing in a little window on my desktop. I don't know, man. If you take one thing from this video, it should be to just buy the remastered versions of games when you can. Anyway, enough about all that. Alice has a kind of basic combat system. You have two basic means of attacking, left and right click. Left being primary fire, right being alternate, and what that means depends on the weapon. The first one you unlock is a knife. It requires no mana, or meta essence as they call it in this game. I'm not calling it that. The knife's primary is just a slash. Its secondary has you throw the knife, then recovering it a couple seconds later. The second weapon is a deck of cards. The primary is just like shooting cards at an enemy. The secondary has you shoot a burst of cards at them. This weapon is good at the start, but basically useless at the end. Like a whole mana bar worth of attacks won't kill a single enemy. Third, you get the croquette stick, which has a melee attack similar to the knife, and then a secondary which has you shoot a croquet ball at the enemy. It's pretty mid to be honest. Next you unlock the jack-in-the-box, which I used like once. Its primary has you throw one that explodes a few seconds later, basically useless, but its secondary is actually decent. You throw one down where it begins spinning in circles, shooting fire the entire time. After that you get the second best weapon in the game, at least of the primary weapons. It's this scepter that shoots icy air out of it as a primary. This does such an insane amount of damage compared to every other weapon you've gotten up to this point, although it burns through mana super quickly. Its secondary fire has you create a little ice wall that you can hide behind, which is cool I guess. The next weapon is even better, the jacks. Now I never played jacks, and I would be willing to bet most of you haven't either. I don't think many people watching my channel were born in the 50s, but this weapon is crazy. So the primary fire has you throw the handful of jacks, where they home onto an enemy and fly around hitting them like a swarm of bees or something. It does insane damage and uses very little ammo. The downside is that you can only throw this out one at a time, so it doesn't work great on groups of enemies. Its secondary is basically just throwing the jacks at an enemy without the homing. It's good for finishing enemies off and you get to throw them again quicker afterwards. Next you get the Eye of the Jabberwock staff, which is really good but hard to use. It takes a second to charge before firing a laser out that does crazy damage, and when you stop the laser, it shoots a little fireball out as a finisher. It's really good for dealing with enemies at a distance, but basically useless close range. The secondary allows you to charge for as long as you want, then shoot a big orb at a single enemy, which is kinda useless in my opinion. The final, primary weapon is the blunderbuss, which you might be able to find before the final boss, but I didn't. It uses your entire mana bar at once, but does super high damage. There's also this dice you can throw. I have no idea what its secondary does, but its primary fire opens a little portal and a flying gargoyle thing comes out. It's actually really good. The only problem is that once the gargoyle runs out of enemies to kill, it comes after you. It did have one really obscure use for me though, when I needed an enemy to stand on a pressure plate for me and I couldn't find any, so I had to summon one. The final weapon is the stopwatch, which you can use to stop time for a surprisingly long time, like 30 seconds or something. You can only use it once in a blue moon and it doesn't work on bosses, so I barely used it. But there's also two pickups you can find. The first is a red vial which turns Alice into a demon or something.
How fine you look when dressed in red. Your enemies are fortunate that your condition is not permanent, and you're lucky too. Red eyes should serve you.
It greatly increases your damage and reduces the damage that you take from enemies. The second is a little bug that you can pick up and eat, which makes you super fast and gives you a higher jump. Besides that, combat is pretty simple, just don't get hit. The controls in Alice are passable. If I hadn't played Nocturne right before this, I might have complained about the platforming. It's kinda easy to slide right off platforms in this game, but compared to Stranger, Alice is a parkour god. Just like Nocturne, Alice allows you to quick save and load whenever you want, but it also has occasional autosaves in case you quick save in a bad spot. This actually happened pretty often to me, like one time where I quick saved right before a boulder hit me. I also just often mixed up the buttons for quick save and quick load, so like I would mess up a jump and be falling down a cavern, but accidentally press F4 which saves rather than F1 which loads, which of course means that my quick save has now been moved to moments before my death. Anyway, the voice acting in this game is similarly passable. Most of the voices are unmemorable or kinda bad, but Alice and the Cheshire Cat in particular both have amazing voice actors.
You've gone quite mangy, Cat, but your grin's a comfort.
And you've picked up a bit of an attitude, still curious and willing to learn, I hope.
Wonderland's become quite strange. How is one to find her way?
As knowing where you're going is preferable to being lost, ask. Rabbit knows a thing or two, and I myself don't need a weather vane to tell which way the wind blows.
You pursue me to this deserted place.
To benefit from your wisdom.
Even blurred vision is valued by the blind. If I were clever, would I cower in this slag heap? I'm not wise, girl. I've just grown old.
Are things really as bad as all that?
The truth would reduce you to a blubbering baby. Are you the savior Rabbit has been telling us about all this time?
I shouldn't think so. I'm a person. And just now, I wish to get very small. About this big.
Calls for serious twisting.
It's a good thing that both Alice and Cheshire had good voice actors, because they have far and away the most lines in the game. Alice, of course, is the main character, and Cheshire is your guide throughout the entire game. Anyway, let's go level by level through American Mcgee's Alice, so that you can understand why it gives you so much tonal whiplash. Anyway, level 1 takes place in a gnome village where all of the gnomes have been enslaved and forced to work by the Red Queen. Cheshire tells you to follow Rabbit. If you don't know who these characters are, then go watch the movie, bro. I don't know. Like, how could you not know Alice in Wonderland? Anyway, you're supposed to follow Rabbit, but he shrinks down to the size of an ant to escape the slave village, so you need to do the same. The way you do that is by finding a gnome elder who supposedly knows the method. The only enemies on this level are card guards. These guys range in difficulty, but these early ones just have a simple melee attack and a ranged attack. Anyway, the old gnome tells you need to visit the Fortress of Doors, which starts off as a weird kind of interdimensional place, then turns into a twisted schoolhouse filled with those crazy tortured children. Again, what a crazy thing to be in an Alice in Wonderland game. They're never even addressed or explained at all, by the way. But yeah, this level is the first one where you could consider it to be horror. Beyond the children, a new enemy type here are these flying wraiths. Anyway, the old gnome makes you a shrinking potion, and the next level is another fun adventure in Wonderland. You fight army ants and robotic bugs that drop bombs on you. This level is fun simply because of the perspective change. Like you get to ride on a tiny leaf down a little stream. It's cool. This is also where you fight the first boss, the Duchess, who's trying to eat your friend, the Mock Turtle. It's actually a pretty fun fight. Duchess's main form of attack is shooting streaks of pepper at you. She's trying to eat you, by the way. Anyway, fast forward through a lot more insects plus some flowers and mushrooms that attack you, and you finally find Rabbit, who tells you he's taking you to meet Caterpillar. The second you finally catch up with him, he gets squashed by the Mad Hatter. Damn, okay. You end up finding Caterpillar, who says that you need to defeat the Red Queen to gain your consciousness back in the real world.
Destroy the Queen of Hearts. Wonderland and your entire world can become whole again. I need to rest now. You need to regain your human size. Grow up, Alice. Embrace the truth.
The next boss is the leader of the army ants, who is weirdly a centipede. This boss fight is kinda cool, although it is a little gimmicky. The only way you can damage Centipede is by hitting this little weak spot on his underside, which he exposes when he does a certain attack. So you basically wait for him to do that attack, dodging his attacks and killing the little enemies he spawns along the way. The following few levels are even more fantastical. You end up in this central volcano type area where you meet two new enemies, little imps which are super weak, and these little fire things which are super rare. That part leads into this pretty long section where Alice involves herself in the ongoing war between two chess kingdoms, one red and one white. You have to fight red versions of all the basic chess pieces, pawns and knights, bishops and rooks, while occasionally having help from the white versions of those pieces. You even become a chess piece at certain points to solve little puzzles related to how those pieces are allowed to move. Again, it's just like fun Wonderland shit. There's actually a clever part here, where the White King asks you to help save his queen, giving you a pawn to help you out. But by the time you reach her, the Reds have already beheaded her. But of course that doesn't matter, because you can just make your pawn into a new queen for the White King. Anyway, we're then pulled right back into the crazy shit when the Mad Hatter kidnaps Alice and drags her into his lab. Like, you literally wake up on a lab table surrounded by those crazy children again. This level introduces two new enemies, these robots which are made out of lobotomized gnomes, and these flying bat-like enemies called Phantasmagorias. This level gets even more insane when you find a rabbit and mouse that have been turned into half cyborgs by the Mad Hatter. What's even worse is that the only way to progress is to pull a lever which starts torturing them. The boss of this level is Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and it's actually a cool fight. The big one is Tweedledee and the little one is Tweedledum. Dee will fly around the arena with his little propeller hat, trying to drop down on you, which does crazy damage if it hits. Dum, on the other hand, opens up and spawns little versions of himself which do the same flying thing that Dee does. It's pretty cool. You end up finding a griffin trapped in here. He tells you that if you want to fight the Mad Hatter, you need to set the clock to 6, which is when he comes in to experiment on Griffin. Once you do that, you actually kind of get jump scared by him. This fight is the first one I would consider difficult, and like the fights afterwards, I don't really know how I won. This applies more to a later boss, but it's like I didn't really do anything different the times I won, versus the times I didn't. I don't know. Anyway, Mad Hatter has a variety of ranged attacks that he does, and if the fight goes on long enough, he'll occasionally dip out and spawn some henchmen for you to kill. Next is a fiery level filled with imps, ghouls, and these dinosaur-looking enemies. The boss of this level is the Jabberwock, a half-robot, half-gargoyle monster that shoots fire, shoots lasers, and loves to fly around so that you can't hit him. You fight this guy twice, and both of them are far and away the hardest bosses in the game. His fire just has such insane range on it, and if you stay inside for too long, Alice catches on fire and continues to take damage. This is the guy I meant when I said I don't really know how I beat him. Like, it just seems like my jacks were doing more damage on my successful run than they were on my earlier ones. Anyway, you're fighting this guy to steal his eye and complete the Jabberwock staff, which can then break down the walls of the Queen's castle. Once you do that, you enter a hedge maze outside the castle walls, which is a super confusing level, as hedge mazes tend to be. I just finished this level earlier today as of writing, and I probably couldn't do it again. Anyway, before entering the Queen's castle proper, you need to fight the Jabberwock again, and this fight is way harder. That's entirely because he spends the first half of the fight completely in the air, breathing fire down on you. This fight got to the point where I was looking at forum posts seeing how other people beat him. Again, I don't know why my strategy worked once when it didn't work other times, but I ended up using the Jabberwock staff. Once you deal enough damage, he goes to the ground and it's just like the first fight again. But before that, man, goddamn. Anyway, the Queen's Castle is a visually very interesting level. It's weirdly fleshy, which makes sense when we see the Queen later. But right before we meet her, we see her decapitate the Cheshire Cat.
Worse to come. You and this Red Queen cannot both survive. You are two parts of the same...
Damn. The Queen boss fight takes place in two parts. The first is against this faceless tentacle type thing that only has ranged attacks and stays out of the range of most of your weapons. I think only the Jabberwock staff and deck of cards can even hit her here. That's not the main course though, because when you do kill the Queen, she reveals her true form as this thing.
I rule Wonderland alone. Your interference will not be tolerated. This realm is for grown-ups.
Raw, well-ordered, ruthless, careening on the jagged edge of reality. Self-pitying dreamers are not wanted here.
And you descend into an abyss beneath the castle to fight her. I'm sure you can beat her without this, but on a somewhat hidden ledge you can find the blunderbuss, which makes this fight super easy. Anyway, it takes place on a series of floating platforms. The queen launches ranged attacks at you while you jump from platform to platform, looking for more mana and healing. It's fun, but yeah, pretty easy with the blunderbuss. And with that, Alice slays the Queen of Hearts, also slaying the guilt within herself at her parents' death. It wasn't really her fault, but you can understand how a little kid could feel that way. Wonderland goes back to normal and all of your friends who were brutally killed throughout the story come back to life. Alice wakes up in the real world and is discharged from the asylum. This game is pretty good. I think I probably agree with the 7 to 8 out of 10 scores it received when it launched. I've never played Alice Madness Returns and I don't really plan on changing that, but if you ever do, you should check out the remaster of this game that comes with it. So that was 5 early PC horror games. Phantasmagoria is barely a game, but it's kind of entertaining to play and watch. Blood is a pretty fun boomer shooter that is hard as hell. Sanitarium is a really interesting experience, if for nothing else than the weird-ass settings it takes place in. Nocturne had a lot of potential aside from the stupid-ass platforming, and American Mcgee's Alice is pretty fun if a little inconsistent. Thank you all so much for watching.